surrounding Tartaria and the lost Tatar Empire, whose culture is said to have influenced almost every continent, is taking on increasingly bizarre forms. American and Russian amateur researchers in particular are convinced that the Tatar Empire was the originator of Greco-Roman architecture, an architecture that can be seen worldwide in old photos and that was gradually destroyed. So was the memory of it. Evidence? Mainly books written after 1800, one or two documents from the American Secret Service and the works of Anglo-Saxon YouTubers and Russian revisionists. At the same time, the cross-generational work of historians and archaeologists is dismissed as pure fantasy and inadequate. All evidence that does not point to a Tatar empire is said to be fake. It's that simple today. All it takes is a good story and a few interesting pictures on YouTube or TikTok to convince the consumer with the attention span of a goldfish. Yes, our history is fake, without question. And people like Wilhelm Kammeyer, Uwe Topper and many others have written about it and presented plausible arguments long before anyone resurrected the Tatar Empire. And yes, there are old ruins overseas that point to Roman, Greek and even Egyptian influences in places where, according to conventional wisdom, they shouldn't actually be. Yes, there are a lot of mysterious artifacts that cannot be classified. Everything that is labelled inexplicable today is said to be of Tatar origin, although clear evidence is missing. And yet these finds point to an essential fact. It must have been different from what we were told in history class. Very different. Recently, more and more maps of Tataria have been found by chance, drawn by cartographers that no one knows, or that do not contain any information about the author. Alleged evidence passed around like candy. Old photos of buildings and people do the rest. Mostly these are passed around without a source or location. The only problem with this is that today such photos can be produced in large quantities by AI-supported image generators, and by their very nature have neither a photographer as author nor a history of origin. You can't even tell from such internet images whether it is a real photograph or an AI-generated image. Tataria is depicted as a lost utopia, a paradise where peace, joy, a happy life and free energy were the order of the day under Tatar rule. A realm with supposedly advanced technology, a global culture that built its structures in the Greco-Roman architectural style. And yet, there are no archaeological finds to confirm this connection to Tataria. It is categorically assumed that mysterious finds have been confiscated and hidden by secret services and other history obscurants for centuries. The artifacts that Erich von Däniken and others made known to the general public point to advanced civilizations, yes, but to construct a connection to a Tatar empire from them requires some serious mental acrobatics. Däniken's theory of ancient extraterrestrial visitors and the story of a Tatar empire have one thing in common. They suggest that it was not our ancestors who created certain buildings and structures, but rather aliens who made the now irreplicable surgical tools of obsidian, the pyramids, or the underground tunnel systems, or the extinct giants who created cathedrals and monuments on a massive scale, and of course, the inexplicable buildings of Europe and elsewhere were not built by the ancestors of present-day people, but by someone else. We are only the inheritors, they say, as if everything in history older than 250 years has been a lie, and the population has been replaced altogether. Archaeologists and historians may be misguided, but that does not mean that these people are stupid, do not achieve results and cannot draw conclusions from them. If there was a high civilization, then it must be built on different principles than those in use today. Based on other forms of energy production, on other technology, and other knowledge about the nature of things and the magic and powers inherent in them. And even giants could well have been our direct ancestors. All it takes is a higher CO2 content in the air, a slightly different composition of the atmosphere. There must be a reason why this gas is so demonized today. After all, nobody should get the wrong idea. There was a mud flood. Yes, but there are also cultural layers in which archaeologists find artifacts. And these artifacts do not correspond to what a high technical civilization as we know it today is supposed to have been. There are neither the same things to be found which would indicate industrial production, nor are there objects to be found that indicate a specifically Mongolian or Tatar origin in Europe. Even if the objects found cannot be precisely dated and assigned, and sometimes it is not even known exactly what they were used for, archaeology does not confirm a Tatar high civilization in the form in which it is spread on the Internet. Likewise, one finds no Asian or Mongolian facial features on the busts and statues found. The typical European is always shown. If you look at the sarcophagi of the Middle Ages, which are located in crypts under churches, you will also find no evidence of a Tatarian origin. It is unlikely that these things are all fake, even if there are problems with the dating and chronology. The griffin symbol can be found not only on the coat of arms of Tataria, but also on coats of arms in various countries. Even today this figure can still be found as statues or on buildings in all parts of Europe. Does the griffin on the coat of arms of the German Hanseatic city of Greifswald, or the griffin on the coat of arms of Kasekau in Brandenburg, Brzesko in Poland, or Chulex in Switzerland mean that these people ruled an empire? Probably not. The griffin has a very own history. As everyone can recognize by children's drawings, at what age they were drawn, you can also see that castles and medieval buildings seem to have been built earlier than the ancient Roman Greek buildings. It seems likely that antiquity took place after the Middle Ages and not before. This is also supported by the many preserved ancient and the few remaining medieval ruins that can be found today. Anatoly Fomenko and Gleb Nosovsky, the two Russian mathematicians who found methods to compare historical events with each other in order to reorder them chronologically, cannot, however, determine with certainty whether historical events are real or just inventions. They work with existing material and compare it and find that historical events repeat themselves with different names in different places at different times, but they cannot say with certainty whether the original story itself really happened that way or whether it happened at all. Even if many pictures, stories and documents may have been falsified, altered or even invented, there was a great empire in Europe in the past, with influence reaching as far as the most remote regions of the earth. The German Empire. Every well-trained Teuton winces at these words and is inclined to turn away shuddering. This explains why the Teuton in particular turns to the painless subject of Tataria and does not even think about considering his own history. The memory of a German empire has been thoroughly spoiled for this people. No wonder, a lot has been done for it in the Third Reich. That was Adolf Hitler. And then there was the Second German Reich, which was the two emperors, both named Wilhelm. This state, now called the Golden Age, emerged after everything had been done to pull the princes and kings of the many small kingdoms, principalities, small and city-states over the table and to extort concessions from them. Thanks to the German politician Otto von Bismarck. In the 19th century, he managed to centralize the structures that had existed for ages and were based on regions, and decentralized structures. The result, a second German Empire, a state that was extremely chauvinistic and had nothing, absolutely nothing in common with the First German Empire. The Holy Roman Empire of German nations was not a state, and nor was it a country with national borders. It was a cultural area with great influence. The linguist Peter von Polenz asserts that from the old High German period until the 19th century, the word Reich was not limited to power and dominion. It was used primarily in a non-political sense as a general term for area, thus designating landscape, region, environment, or compass direction. A nation is a community of people united by a common language, culture, or territory. An autonomous community with institutions designed to ensure the peaceful coexistence of its people is also called a nation. and the totality of the people who belong to a nation is also called a nation, for example the Indian nation, the African nation, etc. The words nation or empire do not refer to a single country or even a territory, but to a cultural area. And this Holy Roman Empire of German nations existed from the year 962 to the year 1806, exactly the time about which we know so little and which is claimed to be the time of the great Empire of Tataria. What a coincidence! This also means that all buildings older than 220 years were built during this first German Empire. The same buildings that can be seen in the first early photos of the Old World, which are said to have something to do with Tataria. The same goes for the star cities. These can be found all over the world, and also seem to have been built during the time of the First Empire. The city walls of almost every major old city are depicted as a star city on maps of the Middle Ages. There is much speculation about the purpose of this shape, but there is no evidence of direct Tatar-Mongolian influence. Almost all European countries once had German kings on the throne. Even today, the German house of Saxony, Coburg and Gotha still holds the English royal throne under the name of Windsor. And even earlier, monarchs from the House of Hanover, the Welfs, ruled the English Empire. Even the Merovingians, who are said to have ruled from the 5th to the 8th century, and then the Carolingians from the 8th to the 10th century, all had German names. Many names in English, French, and other languages can be traced back to old High German names, almost as if they were invented there. Other countries have similar histories. German, or better, Old German was spoken. This was also the case in England, as Old English uses German grammar and a large number of Old High German words. The term Anglo-Saxons for English speakers is no coincidence. But it wasn't just at court that German was the language of scholars, it was also the language of European, American and Russian universities. If there had ever been a great empire of Tataria, then remnants of it would still be found in the language today, in geographical designations and names. There is no sign of this. But one can find German words and names everywhere. All pure coincidence. That doesn't mean anything, does it? And even German culture is not limited to Germany, today as in the past. Russia had Germans in the economy, in the universities, and even the Russian Tsar's chair was not spared by Germans. Countless German enclaves were and are found far from the German countryside, in Europe, Asia, and overseas. Heim ins Reich, back to the motherland, was a slogan 80 years ago in Germany. This raises the question of what all these Germans were doing abroad so far from home. If one assumes that these German enclaves are remnants of the First German Empire, then the cultural reach of that empire can be roughly estimated. And that would roughly correspond to what is said about the alleged Tatar Empire today. Of course, it's all a coincidence, because the Germans are bad, or at least their ancestors. Everyone knows that today, and that's exactly what makes you wonder. The fact that the German has been driven into discord with his own forefathers and his own history is as suspicious as it is massive. No museum mentions that artifacts from the First German Empire were found. No city mentions that its castle was built during the time of the Holy Roman Empire of German nations. Even in Switzerland and Austria, this fact has disappeared from the general awareness of history, although they were part of it. The memory of this First Empire was covered by the glimmer and splendor of the Second Empire and by the fateful burden of the Third Empire. The Old World was the First German Empire, not a state, but a large cultural area with hundreds of small, autonomous, decentralized liberal structures, just a nation, and only so can the abundance of literature, art, and architectural creativity be explained. Such a cultural entity cannot be governed. If you want to do that, you first have to destroy the decentralized structures and forcibly or by stealth unite the small countries to make a state out of it. That is exactly what happened. Across Europe and overseas, the country was transformed into a state structure. Apparently it should no longer be remembered that it is possible to do without large concentrations of power and that society was sustainable over a long period of time in regional structures. If you look closely, you can still find remnants of these old structures in the principalities, free states, cantons and municipalities, and especially in the different dialects in Germany, Switzerland, and also in other European languages. The history of the First German Empire is full of contradictions and curiosities, and a great deal is unknown. There are inexplicable artifacts, impossible buildings, star cities, and much more that suggests that in terms of civilization and technology, people were much further along than they are willing to admit today. Whether Charlemagne ever existed is as questionable as the dates used for the chronology of this empire. It seems as if this empire had undergone its own development, ranging from simple castles to complex palaces and cathedrals to architectural works of art in the Roman style. The addition Roman itself appeared late in the 15th and 16th centuries, when the Catholic Church carried out its brutal crusade against the European pagans. The Catholic Church and the introduction of the banking system are closely linked to the decline of this empire. Greed and religious dogmas destroyed this once liberal society. When the Holy Roman Empire was dissolved in 1806 and modern states were established in the 19th century, it was the death blow for freedom and thus for the artistic creativity of Europeans. The decline of aesthetics and values is clearly evident in the European art and architectural history of the last 250 years. Tataria may have existed, like many other empires, and no one speaks of them today either, but nowhere has so much effort been made to humiliate, rape, and frighten a particular population for 250 years, to turn them into obedient, hard-working yes-sayers. Something like this is not done without reason, and the true cause may lie in the fact that the descendants of the former inhabitants of this empire are deliberately kept in the dark about their history and cultural achievements. So who benefits from the history of Tataria? When a few years ago a large part of the Internet population developed an interest in the lost old world, the term Tataria soon appeared as a catch-all term in all Western languages. It was as if someone wanted to steer the discussion in a certain direction, or as if they wanted to distract from the true history of Europe. Even if Tataria is a hype today, the lack of evidence and the way artifacts, buildings and finds are mixed together make the whole thing implausible. Once again, the aim is to separate Europeans from their own history. This applies not only to Germans, but to all European countries. Those who have no deep roots have no firm footing, which is necessary for decency, resistance, and endurance. If you delve into history, you will find documents, chronicles, legends, and many artifacts that point to a form of society that we can hardly imagine today. The old empire was pagan, or multi-religious. The Catholic Church contributed significantly to the destruction of this free society. Even today, you can still see the remains of a completely decentralized world, and even today people still know that there was a golden age in the Middle Ages. A world that flourished because of an honest monetary system in the form of bracteates. It was only with the invention of the credit system and the emergence of paper currencies and pledges in the 15th and 16th centuries that the accumulation of financial power became possible. The over-indebtedness of princes and kings thus led to the nationalization of the world. Today we speak of the corporatization of the world, a very similar process carried out by the same means, again through debt. This time, however, it is not the princes, but the states themselves that have become vulnerable to blackmail and ultimately controllable through debt. And again, centralization is to take place, and a new world state is to emerge from it. A world state, as Tataria is said to have once been. The concept of a decentralized social structure is not to be found in the Tataria saga. Rather, the idea of a united world empire is conveyed, very much in line with today's New World Order agenda. Not only is the past being lied about, but in the present too, certain groups have no interest in people learning about where they came from, how they once lived, and what catastrophes wiped out earlier civilizations. Probably for the simple reason that their role in the downfall of this old world would then become obvious.